Hello everyone. In this video, we'll try to understand what is design patterns, why do we need the design patterns, and we'll see some design patterns that are widely used in microservices, right? So first, let's get started. What is a design pattern? A design pattern is a solution, right, for commonly occurred problem that developer face during the development. Right, in simple, design pattern is a predefined solution for commonly occurred problems, right? Why do we need a design pattern? Very simple. To build a stable product. Okay, we'll take one example. Maybe let's say if I want to grow a vegetables, right? I want to form a vegetable, right? So it's not like you take the vegetable seeds and plant it. No, there are many parameters you need to consider, right? Many parameters you need to check whether this particular vegetable grows in this soil or not, right? Is it the right season to grow the particular vegetable? How about the water supply? There are many things you have to think before you plant a tree, or maybe before you form a vegetables in our case, right? If you don't follow these patterns or the parameters, right, then obviously you won't get the desired output. I mean, the desired, in our case, what? A vegetable, right? So in similarly, when you are building a product, a software product, you have to follow these patterns, right? Or you have to follow these certain parameters, right, to build a stable product, right? And that's why the design patterns are crucial. So keep it in mind when you are building any product, right? You have to follow the design patterns. So if you ask me, hey Teja, I want to build a microservices, right? So search for the design patterns for microservices. Let's say if you want to build some web application, search for a design patterns for building a web application. You want to build a database, search for design patterns for building a database or creating the database. So you have design patterns for everything. That is the must, right? So as this series is mainly meant for microservices, let's see some design patterns that are widely used in microservices. There are many, but these are the widely used, right? So one is decomposition pattern: by business, by subdomain, right? So we'll in our upcoming videos, right, I'll make a separate video as for each of this the design pattern, right? So decomposition means, like, what is microservices, right? You are like breaking a monolithic right, breaking the monolithic into pieces, right, creating more services, right? So it's called a microservices, right? You'll have a lot of services instead of a single application. You have lots of services, right? So how do you decide that you need this many services, right? This many microservices you need to create. That is based on your business understanding, right? So it is again based on the subdomain. When you talk about the business, let's say e-commerce is a business. In e-commerce business, you have subdomains like payment, analytics, etc., etc., right? That's what the decomposition pattern meant for. And the database pattern, like database service, schema per service, CQRS, event sourcing. This is a little bit important topic. So I decided to make a separate videos for this, different pattern design patterns for microservices. The another important thing is communication patterns. See, this decomposition pattern and communication pattern are very important, because decomposition pattern will tell you how many microservices you need. Is it based on business or based on subdomain, right? And the communication patterns, synchronous and asynchronous. So we'll discuss what is synchronous and asynchronous, when we should go for synchronous, when we should go for asynchronous. That part we'll discuss. So this communication pattern are very important. And integration pattern, so like API gateway, aggregator, right? We'll also discuss what is API gateway. API gateway is very important, a concept or design pattern in microservices world, right? So I'll also make a separate video on API gateway, right? We'll also take one example, right? One a use case, right, where we'll use API gateway, right? And the deployment pattern. We know one of the major problem or disadvantages using microservices is, right, we have lots of services. it's definitely not possible to deploy all the services in single server. We need multiple servers, right? So this is the design pattern mainly for deployment. How you want to deploy your applications, microservices, either it's in a single service or a multiple services, right? So even there are many more design patterns in microservices. These are commonly used, design patterns in microservices, and these are the design patterns which we are going to discuss in the same sequence. We'll talk about API gateway, what is API gateway meant for and why we need it, asynchronous and synchronous services, database per service, CQRS, event sourcing, decomposition pattern. All these 10, as I said, there are many design patterns in microservices, but based on my experience, I feel this 10 design patterns are very important. It is must and should you should understand this, right? So I decided to make maybe a 10 short videos on each of this topic, right? Maybe it may be 3 to 10 minutes 3 minutes to 10 minutes of each video, right? And then after this, what we'll do is we'll take a simple example, right? We use Python, Flask, etc to see a simple microservice architecture. In obviously at the end we have to make our hands dirty, right, to understand, because all these are theoretical. We'll see some practicals also, right? So hope you understand what is design pattern, why we need design pattern. Hey everyone, in this video we'll try to understand what is API gateway, why do we need API gateway, right? So in our last video we understand what is design patterns and why do we need design patterns, right? So API gateway is one of the design pattern, for microservices. So let's get started. So if you see, right, this is the typical architecture, right? Forget about microservice, a general, architecture, right? So you have your APIs deployed here in one of the server, right? Under the client, maybe, using some browser or some web application or some mobile application. I'm just trying to, call these APIs, right? This is the typical architecture. Now, what if I keep a middleman, maybe let's call middleman, right? Like this, something like this, right? So instead of my client directly talk to my server, right, he'll talk to a middleman, maybe some other server you can say, right? And this guy will make sure of the routing. Okay, so he knows everything. What are the services deployed in my API service? So API server, right? So now this guy is typically called a reverse proxy server, also called API gateway. So API gateway will act as a reverse proxy server. So reverse proxy is one of the feature of API gateway. There are many features, but yes, this is one of the important feature of the API gateway, because here I'm not giving my server details directly to any of the client, right? So he is here in between. So he'll take care of any attacks happens, right? Maybe you can say first level of attack, right? Okay. Now, as we discussed, reverse proxy is one of the feature of API gateway, which is very important. Now, what is API gateway or reverse proxy? By now you have understand, right? So API gateway is a tool that sits between a client, here in our case a web application, and the collection of your backend APIs or backend services, right? So this guy is a middleman, right? And what is his roles and responsibilities? So he'll take care of authentication. For example, if you have hundreds of APIs, hundreds of microservices, do you really think, implementing this authentication mechanism in all the services? It is possible, but how complex it is, right? In each and every microservice, you have to check if your request is authenticated or not. That's an additional burden to your service, right? So this guy, this API gateway, will take care of authentication. So if the request is authenticated, if it is valid, then only it will route to the respective service. Now, what is the other feature? Request routing. Just now we discussed, right? This API gateway knows which service to be called. Let's say if I want to call a login page, right? So from the client, I'll call this API gateway. Hey, API gateway, I want to log in. So he'll call the respective service, right? That is technically called a request routing and metrics. This is very, very important because see, I wanted to know, right, how many requests I got into my API, and how many are success, how many are failure, etc., etc. Writing such a this is technically a complex logic, right? And it might not be a complex logic, but we are making our logic complex, right? So we are keeping an additional burden to the service, right? Writing authentication, writing this metrics logics, right? Checking how many requests success, how many requests fail, which user called how many times, user A called 10 times, all those things you have to write the logic in a service. Instead, your API gateway will take care of that. That's awesome, right? And not just that, the best part is that you can control. Let's say, for example, an user A can access so and so service only 10 times. If it's trying to hit 11th time, then it will say, hey, your limit existed. So you can access only 10 times. So now you are decoupling, the common logic, right? When I say common logic, authentication, matrices, this limit, whatever it is, right? To to the single person, right? He is taking care of all those things instead of you maintaining our services, right? And another important feature is load balancing. Load balancing is very, very important, right? In case of microservice applications. For example, when you talk about a e-commerce application, right? We have many services. We already seen that, right? In our previous videos. So like payment gateway, shopping cart, product search, your analytics. So if you see out of these four services, usually the user do more product search, right? Which means you're keeping more burden on the product search. That says that you have to scale your product search, right? Scaling in the sense what? Instead of deploying it in one place, you will deploy it in multiple places, multiple times, so that your request will be routed to the multiple services. That's the same job. Now, obviously, if you deploy your service two, three times at two, three different places, you'll get two, three different APIs. I mean, the URLs, right? How can I ask user, hey, call this URL, this URL, this URL? I cannot do that, right? And what this guy, the load balancer in API Gateway does is, will tell this API Gateway, hey, this particular product search is deployed in three different places. And these are the three different URLs for those. And this guy will take care of that. Whenever you get a request, he knows maybe which service is busy. Out of three different deployments, it knows, okay, this particular service is called, send the request to them. Or else it can use some round robin techniques or whatever it is, right? So it will also, API Gateway will also access load balancing, right? The another one is a dependency resolution. Maybe we can call it as, the protocol transformation, right? So for example, few of your services are built using RPC protocol, right? But somehow your client cannot call RPC protocol. It can call only REST. So here is a dependency with the protocols, right? Your client can call only REST, but your service is deployed using RPC. How do I do that? And that's where again we have API gateway. So API gateway will also make sure the protocol transformation, right? Like, in our case, REST to RPC and RPC to REST, right? And also cache management. So this is very important, right? Let's say, if you are accessing a frequent content, right? The content that changes very less, right? In that case, what happens if I cache it? Instead of every time I fetch from database, I'll cache it here itself. So that obviously you are reducing a burden on your service and also database, right? And also the response time will be faster, right? So hope you understand, right? Why we need API gateway and the different features, different, functionality that API gateway provides you, right? Now, of course, you also might have understand that how important API gateway is for mainly for microservices architecture, right? So this is more of theoretical as we discussed. So we'll also have a couple of design patterns which we are going to cover in upcoming videos. So in our hands-on session, we'll take Nginx as our API gateway, and we'll try to approach implement the same feature whatever you're seeing here, right? Hello everyone. In this video, we'll try to understand what is asynchronous service. Asynchronous service actually falls under a communication design pattern, right? So under communication design pattern, actually we have two types of services, synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous is actually, straightforward. If you give a request to your API, it will give you the desired response immediately in certain time bound. Where in case of asynchronous, if you give a request, it will give you acknowledgement. It won't give you the desired response. It will give you the acknowledgement saying that, hey, I got your request, I am processing it, right? So this is called asynchronous services. So we'll take a simple examples and try to understand what is asynchronous and how important is an asynchronous service. Let's take our traditional approach. I mean, the traditional example. So I went to a restaurant and I ordered something. Obviously, the waiter will go to a chef or a kitchen saying that, this is the order I need. So the chef will say, it will take 15 minutes. So I'll come back to the desk and I'll say, hey, your order will take 15 minutes. This is actually an acknowledgement, not the response, right? In our case, the response is nothing but whatever you ordered. Let's say if I ordered paneer tikka, my response will be paneer tikka. You should get me the paneer tikka. But he said, hey, we ordered your request. The chef told it will take 15 minutes. That's called acknowledgement. Now, after 15 minutes, what this waiter will do? He'll go to the kitchen, get his order, and deliver it to you or me or whoever it is. Right? So this is called a technically an asynchronous service. Right? Now, here why we need asynchronous service? Okay. Now coming to the same example. Now this waiter went to the kitchen. A chef, he gave an order, and chef said 15 minutes. The waiter came back to me and said, please wait for 15 minutes. And what this waiter do is, he'll go to the chef or he'll go to the chicken and he'll wait there for 15 minutes. Okay, when this order is going to wait, and he's not doing anything else. He's just waiting for the order. Once he got the order, he'll get back to me. Do you really think he does he really need to wait 15 minutes here? No. We are blocking his work, right? Instead, he can serve some other bench or some other people, right? And of course, he'll remember, okay, so the people from bench A ordered so and so thing. So it will come in 15 minutes. So in this 15 minutes, I can do something else. Why should I wait for it? Right? And that's the benefit of asynchronous service. We'll take now simple example. Let's say in e-commerce world, right? So we always have the list of order. Let's say if I purchased some product 5 years back, somehow I need an invoice. So what I'll do, I'll log into Amazon or Flipkart, any of the e-commerce site, and I'll go to 2015 and I'll select the product where I would need an invoice. So this is my service. What I'll do is, hey service, I need invoice for so and so order, which I raised some decades ago, for example, right? Usually, what it need to do, this particular service need to go to the database, fetch all the required information from millions, trillions of transaction, convert that into the PDF, and send it an email, right? That may typically take maybe 1 minute, for example. And do you really think that I need to wait for a minute saying that, hey, I sent your email? No, I cannot simply sit and wait for the response, right? I'll just say, I need this invoice and I can do something else in my website, right? Now, in that case, this service should respond me back saying that, hey, as soon as I send a request for invoice, it should say me back, hey, I got your request. You will get an email in so and so time. Meanwhile, what this API do is it will send the response to some other service. this sending an invoice job, right? The user requested for invoice, and our this particular service which is exposed to the outside world, this will simply call this service, right? Saying that, hey, so and so customer need an order, read an invoice for so and so order, send an email, and this service will say, okay, I'll do it. Now the user need not to wait, right? Because I request for invoice, obviously I need not to wait in the Amazon portal. I'll check my email, right? Or else I'll have a notification. As soon as I got an email, I'll get a notification and I'll do whatever I want to do with the invoice, right? Now this is the benefit of asynchronous service. So now this particular guy need not to wait until the email is sent to a customer, right? Hope you understand what is asynchronous service and why do we need asynchronous service and its benefits, right? As we discussed, we'll also take one good example, maybe a similar example. We'll try to implement the asynchronous service using Python, Flask, and Docker, right? Hello everyone. In this video, we'll try to understand decomposition pattern. Decomposition pattern is one of the important pattern that we have to consider before starting designing our microservice architecture. Or as let's say if we want to migrate our monolithic architecture to microservice architecture, and even at that time, decomposition pattern is the important pattern that we have to consider. And why it is important pattern to consider? Let's take an example and try to understand. So when you talk about decomposition pattern, we have two different types: decomposition by business or by domain, and the second one is decomposition by subdomain, right? Let's take an example. When you talk about e-commerce application, if you see typically payment, inventory, order management, shipping, there are many areas, but let's consider these are the four areas which I identified. In my case, in let me put it in a simple way, right? So I want to build an e-commerce application, and I identified these four different domains are crucial for me, right? Their payment, inventory, order management, and shipping, right? And if you decompose it, or if you can go a little bit granular, right? When you talk about payment, we have different payment methods. We have payment tracking. When you talk about inventory, we have inventory availability, many things under inventory. Similarly, order management, shipping, right? And now if you see whatever you see here, right, under payment methods and payment tracking, similarly inventory and order management, shipping, these things are called decomposition by subdomain. And whatever you see this payments, inventory, order management, shipping is decomposition by business. So now you understand, right? Before we build a microservice architecture, before we decide how many microservices we need, we have to understand the business, right? So we have to divide our business into two different parts. One is based on the main domain, in our case payments, inventory, order management, shipping. After this, we need to go little bit granular, called based on the subdomain. Like as we see in case of payments, we have different payment methods and payment tracking, right? Hope you understand, right, the importance of decomposition pattern. So if we want to if we want to apply this design pattern, first thing is we have to be very good at the business. We have to understand the business, right? Then only we can decompose our application, in our case e-commerce, into a main domain, which is called maybe a business, and the subdomain. So if we plan this pattern in a perfect manner, then yes, we'll have a perfect microservice architecture, right? Maybe you can consider it as a blueprint, right? The high level print before we started designing our microservice architecture, or before we started building our microservices, right? How many microservices you need under payment, okay? Under inventory management, how many microservices I need, right? Hope you understand, right, the importance of decomposition. Hello everyone. In this video, we'll try to understand an aggregator pattern or an integration pattern. Let's try to understand with a simple use case, right? I have three different microservices. one of the service will give you the address details, email, and the phone number, right? So there might be a case where I need all these three information in one place, right? So maybe a user want to see all this information, some other use case, right? How do I do that? Calling these three different APIs may not be the right option, right? Because I wanted to call one API which in turn gives all these three, details. And that's where we got an integration pattern or aggregator pattern. So technically we can call it aggregator pattern because this particular guy, this integration guy who is sitting in between, he is getting the response from all these three different microservices and doing some kind of aggregation or appending and the sending the response back to the user, right? So we typically call it aggregator pattern, but on a very high level we call it integration, right? Because we are integrating three different microservices within UI. So technically it's an integration, right? So this aggregating pattern or integration pattern are very important in terms of microservices because obviously you have seen it, right? So when you talk about microservices, we are splitting the services as much as we can, right? The micro tiny services, right? So we may have this kind of scenarios a lot, right? So in those cases we definitely need this integration pattern, right? So for example, when you talk about order management or inventory management, right, it's you have bunch of APIs, right? At the end they need to work in a flow, right, in a sequence. For example, let's say if I want to order something, first what I need to do, I need to check the inventory. If it is available, then create an order. Once the order creation is successful, again I need to update back the inventory saying that this item is ordered, right? So this kind of flow usually will happen in the integration layer, right? We may also call it aggregation layer, right? But on a very high level, let's keep it as an integration layer. So that's it about this video. So hope you understand what is this integration layer or aggregator pattern, right? Hello everyone. In this video, we'll try to understand CQRS, command and query responsibility segregation. Okay, let's try to understand what this particular pattern says. So let's take an example. So I have an user interface and I have my database at the backend, obviously. So typically what can I do from this UI is, so the first thing I can do is I can read the data. Maybe I can view the data which is there in my database, right? The second thing I can do is I can perform some operations like, inserting a new data, a new record, update the existing data and delete the existing data. These are the two things that I can do from the UI, for example, right? And these two things are nothing but our command and query, right? Query is nothing but fetching the existing data. Simple. Command is nothing but updating, deleting and inserting a new record. Understand? Now, how this pattern makes sense, how this pattern helps, right? Now, if you see here, so let's say if you typically what database do, right? So it obviously whatever we discussed, right? Both the query and command, our database will do, right? Like CURD operation, right? Create, update, read and delete, right? So what happens if I can separate these responsibilities, right? Like fetching as one responsibility and command like insert, update, delete as a separate responsibility, right? So the burden will be reduced on a single database, right? So now here if you see I'll have a common storage and if you see I have two databases here. One database here if you see that performs only read, right? And the second database which you see here that performs only maybe write, update or delete, any of this operation, right? So typically command operations, right? So what happens, so there might be instance where where I used to read my data less but I used to have a lot of writes. So where I know I can scale this particular writes database accordingly. There might be an instance where I used to write or update or insert a records very less frequently, but I want to read the data a lot. In that case I can scale this particular database accordingly, right? So this is obviously, right, what we are doing is we are trying to apply the microservice architecture and the database, right? So that's where how we can do it. If I can separate the responsibility of my query and command, that's called query CQRS, command and query responsibility segregation or separation, right? So hope you understand. So what is CQRS? I mean, don't worry. So this video is only to understand what is CQRS. We'll see some other examples, right? Hello everyone. In this video, we'll try to understand what is database per service design pattern. So if you want to understand database per service pattern, I would strongly recommend you to watch one of my video called decomposition pattern, which is very important to understand design pattern. So if you want to understand how this database per service works. Okay, so let's get started. So I have a scenario where I have three different services: customer info, order info, and product info. Okay, customer info is nothing but a user information, typical user information, right? Like your name, email ID, phone number, your shipping address, whatever you call it, right? That's a typical customer information. And order information is nothing but what are the things that particular customer ordered, right? And the product information is nothing but like the products which you see in e-commerce website. Like for example, if you want to maybe buy an iPad or iPhone or any phone, in fact, okay. So if you open that particular page, what you see lots of information about the product, right? Like you see images, videos, reviews. Technically speaking, that's an unstructured data. Okay, so when you talk about MySQL or typically any RDBMS databases, do you really think this kind of information, this kind of unstructured information, do you really think that it can handle it? No, right? We can still somehow store it, but how efficient it is? Definitely not, right? And this is where we got database per service. Understand? Now if you see this slide, it makes some sense to me, right? So this customer information, order information, technically it's a relational database, right? So it's like customer information means I'll have username, your email ID, phone number, address. A structured data. When you talk about order information, hey, this is the user ID, this is the username, and he ordered so and so. Technical structured data. And MongoDB is something like it's a NoSQL database which is used to store unstructured data. It's a document oriented database. Let's not discuss about that, but yes, so that can handle the unstructured data what we discuss in the product information. Right? So now this is called database by service. We're not done yet, right? For example, when you talk about customer information, for example, when you talk about Amazon, I have somewhere around 10 million customers. Okay, technically speaking, I have 10 million rows. Just to understand, right? Each customer can buy definitely more than 10 products in a year, right? So if you see, for example, so 10 million customers into 10, how much per year? What about the data? Obviously grows, right? So now in the single database, I'm maintaining both the customer information and the order information, but my order information data is huge. So I want to scale that. Obviously, I want to scale that particular database, right? So if I want to scale this particular database, directly or indirectly, I'm also scaling this customer information data, which I really don't need it, right? So in that case, how about this, right? So I have a separate database for my customer information. I have a separate database for my order information. So if I want to scale this particular order information, I can very well scale it. There are some challenges if we go for this particular approach, right? But yes, so what are those challenges, how we can work, and we'll discuss in our further videos. But you understand what the database per service is. Technically speaking, this is called database per service. And whatever you see here is, so I can create a separate schema for customer information and I create a separate schema for order information. This you can call it schema per service. Instead of you create a multiple databases, you are creating different schemas where you are keeping a customer information separately and order information separately. But still there is a challenge of scaling here, right? In case if you really don't worry about the scaling, for example, both the customer information and order information have the same amount of data, for example, in that case, I would strongly recommend you go for schema per service. right? So for example, either order information or customer information, one of the services more where you'll have humongous amount of data. In that case, a database per service is, the best suited way, right? Hope you understand what is database per service and schema per service, when you should go for one of these options, right? So hope you enjoy this video. Very important thing is, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.